The train station smelled of coal smoke, cold iron, and rejection, and she felt all three settle into her chest as the conductor's voice faded behind her, sharp and final, telling her there was no place for a woman like her on that westbound train. She stood frozen near the platform bench, clutching a small cloth bag that carried everything she owned: 2 dresses, a cracked mirror, and a letter that had once promised marriage, but now felt like a cruel joke folded into paper. Around her, boots thudded, laughter passed, steam hissed, and lives moved forward without noticing how hers had stalled completely. She had been rejected twice that morning, once by the man who never showed up, and once by a world that seemed determined to keep reminding her she was alone. Her shoes were thin, her hands trembling from the cold, and her eyes burned not from tears but from the effort of holding them back. She told herself she would not cry in public, not again. She had already cried when she realized the letter was a lie, cried when the landlady turned her out, cried when the ticket agent looked at her worn coat and shook his head as if poverty itself were contagious. She was 26 and felt ancient, like someone who had lived too many disappointments too quickly. As she turned away from the tracks, unsure where to go next, she felt the weight of unseen eyes on her, though she did not yet know who was watching or why. Across the platform stood a man who did not look like the others rushing for trains. He was still broad-shouldered, wearing a weathered hat pulled low, his coat dusted with travel and time, a cowboy, unmistakably so, with the kind of quiet presence that came from long days under open skies and longer nights of responsibility.
He had arrived with 2 children earlier that morning, twins,
no more than 6, who now sat beside him on a wooden bench, legs swinging, boots mismatched, faces smudged with dust and impatience. They were good children, too good, the kind who had learned early not to make trouble because trouble already lived with them. He had been watching the woman since the conductor turned her away, not out of curiosity but recognition. He knew that look. He had seen it in mirrors, in graves, in the silence of his own house after his wife died. The look of someone being quietly erased. The woman started to walk, then stopped, unsure which direction even mattered anymore. She considered sitting on the bench, but pride stopped her. Pride had been all she had left when everything else was taken. She hugged her bag closer and stared down the road beyond the station, wondering how far she could walk before her feet gave out, before hunger won, before hope finally did. That was when she heard Boots approach, slow and deliberate, not rushed like everyone else's. She did not look up at first. People had learned to pass her by. She had learned to let them. The man stopped a respectful distance away, not too close, not threatening. His shadow fell across the ground beside hers, steady, grounded. Still she did not look. She expected another question she couldn't answer, another judgment she didn't deserve. Then he spoke, and his voice was low, almost hesitant, as if the words themselves carried weight. He didn't start with pity or demand. He didn't ask where she was going or why she was alone. He simply said her name, the one written on the discarded letter, the one she thought only she remembered. That alone made her look up. Their eyes met, and in that moment she saw something she hadn't expected. Not desire, not condescension, but need, the kind of need that came from responsibility rather than loneliness. He explained himself plainly, without flourish. He told her his wife had died 2 winters ago, that the twins were his whole world, that he was not good with softness or gentleness or things that children required when the nights grew long and memories grew sharp. He told her he had come to the station to send them east to relatives who didn't truly want them but would take them anyway. He told her he had been standing there all morning trying to convince himself that was the right thing to do. The woman listened, unsure why he was telling her any of this, unsure why her heart was beating faster when she had sworn she was done hoping. Then he gestured toward the twins who had gone quiet, watching with the solemn curiosity only children possess. "They need a mother," he said, not dramatically, not as a plea, but as a fact. "And when I saw you standing there, being turned away like you didn't matter, I thought, maybe you need a place where you do." The station seemed to fall away around them, the noise dulling, the crowd blurring, until it felt like only the 3 of them and the 2 children existed in that moment. Fear surged through her first. Fear of being used again. Fear of another promise that would collapse under truth. Fear of trusting a stranger whose life she knew nothing about beyond loss and dust. She almost said no. She almost turned away and kept walking because walking was safer than believing. But then one of the twins slipped off the bench and approached her, holding out a small wooden horse chipped and worn from love. "Pa says you look kind," the child said, voice soft but certain. That broke something open inside her, not because she believed she was kind, but because someone needed her to be. The cowboy watched her closely, ready to accept rejection, prepared for it even, because disappointment had become familiar. He did not offer marriage. He did not promise love. He offered shelter, honesty, and choice. "You don't have to decide now," he said. "But the train leaves in an hour. If you want, you could come with us just for the ride." She looked down at her bag, at the life it represented, then back at the tracks that had just refused her. For the first time that day, the future did not feel like a closed door. It felt like a question, and as the steam of the next train rolled in, she realized something else too. Sometimes being rejected was not the end of the road, but the moment you were finally noticed by the right person. The ride away from the station felt unreal to her, as if she had stepped into someone else's life without fully meaning to. The landscape rolling past while the weight of her decision settled slowly, cautiously like snow on an open field. She sat across from the twins in the wagon, their eyes bright with curiosity, their questions gentle but endless, and she answered them honestly without offering promises she didn't yet understand. The cowboy drove in silence, respectful of her uncertainty, but every so often he glanced back, not to check on her obedience but her comfort. When they reached the ranch at dusk, she expected something grand or something broken, yet found instead a modest house standing firm against the wind, weathered but cared for much like the man who owned it. Inside, the home carried the quiet of absence, boots neatly lined, a shawl folded on a chair, the kind of order left behind when grief is still too heavy to disturb. The twins showed her their room with shy pride, 2 small beds side by side, and when night came, they hesitated at the doorway as if unsure whether comfort was still allowed in their lives. Without being asked, she sat between them and read aloud from an old book she barely remembered owning, her voice steady even as her heart trembled, and the children slept for the first time in months without crying. Days passed, then weeks, and slowly she stopped feeling like a guest and began feeling like someone who belonged. She learned the rhythm of the ranch, the way morning started before the sun and ended long after it set, the way responsibility lived quietly in every task. She cooked meals that filled the house with warmth again, stitched torn clothes with care, and listened when the twins spoke about their mother, never correcting their memories, never trying to replace what could not be replaced. The cowboy watched all of this with a mixture of gratitude and fear, afraid to hope too much, afraid to name what was growing between them. One evening, after a long storm trapped them indoors, the truth finally surfaced. She told him about the letter, the lie, the man who never came, and how close she had been to disappearing into a world that didn't care whether she survived or not. He listened without interruption, then confessed his own guilt, how he had almost sent his children away because he believed his grief made him unfit to keep them whole. They did not reach for each other then. They simply understood each other, and that understanding became the foundation of everything that followed. Trouble came, as it always does. A relative of the twins arrived, demanding custody, questioning her presence, calling her temporary, disposable, unnecessary. For the first time, fear returned, sharp and familiar, but this time she did not stand alone. The cowboy spoke with a firmness she had never heard before, defending not just his children but her place beside them. And when the twins clung to her skirt and called her home, the argument ended not with anger but truth. She realized then that motherhood was not something granted by blood or ceremony, but earned through staying when it would be easier to leave. Winter returned, but the house was warmer. Laughter replaced silence. Love arrived quietly without dramatic confessions, growing in shared work, shared loss, shared mornings. One night, standing under a sky full of stars, the cowboy finally spoke the words he had been carrying since the station. Not a demand, not a rescue, but a choice. He asked her to stay, not because the twins needed a mother anymore, but because he needed a partner, and she deserved a future that didn't end at a train platform. She said yes, not because she was afraid of leaving, but because she wanted to remain. And somewhere far behind them, the station that once rejected her faded into nothing more than the place where her life truly began. If you enjoyed this emotional story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful tales of love, loss, and second chances. Your support helps keep these stories alive. Subscribe now and stay with us.